nog 'n episode van Ruggas TV. Ons kuier vandag by 'n Engelsman, so ons gaan met Engels praat. Bart kry dit nie altyd reg nie. Ek sukkel ook baie daarmee, but Shane Wafer is one of the trustees of the National Schools Challenge Trust, and he's also a practicing attorney, and he specializes in sports legal services. Shane, welcome. Introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks so much for inviting me to chat today. Yes, so essentially, in a roundabout way, I'm a sports attorney, specializing in assisting players, specifically with respect to rugby, our youth players, and helping them navigate the complex world of sports negotiations, contracts, the passage from youth rugby to professional rugby. It's become a much more commercialized sport nowadays, and I was chatting to Carl earlier. It's a wonder that sports has only been professional for such a short period of time in South Africa, less than 30 years. Rugby became professional in 1996, and since then it's just taken off, especially in the last few years, possibly since 2010, since the FIFA World Cup was here. Sports in South Africa has taken on a new path. Everyone, how do I say this? The professionalism has become much more upfront. Players are being approached at a much younger age. Contracts are being put in front of them, perhaps before a lot of these players are ready. And that's another topic we can discuss today, is navigating the right time to approach a player and the right time to approach a club or university to the benefit of a player as opposed to the benefit of the club. But I suppose that's something we can touch on a little bit later. Sports law is a very nuanced field. It has come to the forefront a lot more recently with the advent of the Olympics and various professional competitions. There's a lot that needs to be done to better educate our athletes and our players and our clubs as to what it means to be a professional sportsman, what it means to be a professional athlete. It's not so much nowadays a case of a player comes straight out of school, just runs into a team, plays a game and goes home. There's much more to it nowadays. There's much more to being a professional athlete nowadays. It comes with large contracts, with large amounts of money involved, image rights, sponsorship requirements from a club. There's a lot of obligations that come with being a rugby player. Not so much playing rugby anymore. It's more about the total package, what a player can bring to a club, and more so the image he can portray. Being a good rugby player might not be enough nowadays. It's more than playing rugby. It's how you represent your team. It's how you represent your club. It's how you represent your country. The advent of becoming a commercialized sport brings with it a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. But yes, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully we can develop a rapport with your readers and your listeners, and we can better educate our athletes in South Africa today as to what it means to become a professional athlete.
I think let's start at the youngest age. My first question is, at what age can an agent approach a kid? And we know that a lot of the kids get contracted by agents from the age of 15 or 16. So what is the requirements there? And a question I've got is, most of the player agents that's registered at SARU is qualified attorneys, but they're not practicing attorneys. So that contract that gets put in front of the kids, and obviously the kid trusts SARU to only appoint agents that is capable and that kind of stuff. But we see so many kids that signs a contract with a guy, and at the end of the day, it's not close to the expectations that the agent created to the kids. So first question is, from what age are they contracted? And then the qualifications of the agents. I mean, who do you contact to make sure? Who do you contact to get a second opinion of the contract that's put in front of you?
Great question. And this is something we face a lot nowadays. is approaching a player before the time is right to approach a player. Now, in accordance with the law, you can only approach a rugby player at the age of 18 in his personal capacity. Under the age of 18, when a child is a minor, it is very important that when a player is approached, that it is done through their parents and through their legal guardians. It is not right and more so illegal to approach a player under the age of 18 and have him contract with you without getting the parents involved and without getting the legal guardians involved. And it happens a lot. We have a lot of unions, a lot of agencies that approach players at the age of 16, at the age of 15 even, as I said, rugby is becoming more professional now. So at the age of 15, under 16A players, they're considered, close to the best that a school has. Under 16A, first team players, they are being approached by clubs and unions at an earlier and earlier age. And it is vitally important that players understand the rights that they have, with respect to who can approach them, and the rights they have with respect to what they can contract into. And it's very, very important, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is for a youth rugby player to make sure that when he is approached by someone with respect to a professional contract, that he immediately takes that offer to his parents or to his coach or to his confidant at the school, whether it be the strength and conditioning guy or whoever he has a relationship with. He must immediately go straight to that person and inform them that someone has approached him. He's not so sure what he needs to do now. Can they please assist him? And that's perhaps where someone like myself can come in. I'm an attorney. I'm a practicing attorney. I deal with matters like this every single day, whether or not it be a contract, whether or not it be a sponsorship agreement. And it's also very important to differentiate between someone that is a practicing attorney and someone that has got their law degree. Now, as you said, a lot of agents out there in South Africa are attorneys. They have their law degrees, but they may not be practicing every single day. So they may not be able to see the various intricacies with respect to contracts and how the field of contract law is changing. There's a lot of intricate clauses that might get included into contracts that as an attorney that isn't practicing, perhaps they might not have seen before, or they might not be privy to certain information. But it's vitally important that players know their rights. I can't emphasize that enough. Be it 16, 17, or 18, a player has rights. A player is entitled to be represented by someone that can assist him in advising what are his obligations in terms of the contracts. Because it's not so much, like I said, running onto the rugby field and playing rugby. A player, when he signs an agreement with a club, will have various obligations. He'll have to do media. He'll have to be at a certain place at a certain time. He might have doping obligations. Not so much playing. He might have training obligations also. So there are various aspects of a player's contract that we need to delve into, and it's important that a player knows exactly what he needs to do, what the club needs to do, what he's going to get out of the contract.
No, I think you basically answer my question. I mean, personally for me, that's also caring about kids and everything. It's important because although the agent does have a LLB or something, obviously he's not going to advise the client because he's getting commission from the contract that he signs with clubs and everything. And but maybe you can come in here. We've seen a lot of, I'm going to switch to Afrikaans because I think there's no proper word for a bloody scallum in English. We've seen a lot of these guys that's walking around with LLBs that's suspended because of their actions with the contract, suspended with their actions towards their players and everything. And that's not only a South African question, it's a worldwide question. Do you see any need for a guy like Shane in the whole contracting system and everything worldwide?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. I think he touched on a couple of very valid and important points there. The first thing is on the legal and the legal side of being advised contractually is very important. But the bigger picture of a player in my mind, is so much more. There's very good reason to get involved with players at a young age, but we've got to differentiate, Carl, between getting the right contract for a player and really taking his hand and servicing the player and getting him into a guidance and mentorship program, because that is probably my biggest issue in terms of agents at the moment, is that, and it's not that all agents are dark characters. Unfortunately, things go wrong because I think agents are either, a lot of the times, either ill-advised and or they are being pressurized by the company to sign the best players, to get the best deals going so that the commission is there. Or for the most or better part of it, agents are not experienced enough to advise young people at that stage of their careers. And we've got to be honest with each other. As little knowledge that I really have in terms of legal and contractual issues, there I feel I can really play a huge role in terms of advising and mentoring players, because that's my background. That's what I've been doing for 30 years. So that is why it's an absolute necessity, so that you can admit or be in a position to say, listen, I need someone to advise me. I need someone with experience in the contractual and law field, like a Shane and his company, to advise me on certain matters. And likewise, if you're a young, clued up agent and you've got all of these things under the knee, you might turn around and say, listen, help me in terms of mentorship and guidance of players. So, and if there's one thing that I would like to see, especially in South Africa, is that we get some sort of a guidance and mentorship program going for our agents, because I believe we need it. So getting involved with a player at a young age is nothing wrong with, as long as you make it part of a holistic development plan for the player. You've got to take the player through his parents, because it's all about the values that comes out of the home of the player, and extend that into a development program of the player post school, and that includes guidance, mentorship, extension, and strengthening our values before we get to signing the right contract.
Shane, my next question to you. I read an article this morning that came out last night in the UK, that author, how can I put it? He claims that rugby is professional, but still run by amateurs. And we've seen it all over. I mean, with the contract, with the 21 days clause, with Saru, with the players, there was about 50 opinions on what the clause says and what it actually says. You've got a lot of players that reckon they excluded from that and they can still go overseas and everything. So it seems like it's like me being giving somebody legal advice. I've got commercial law 4, I think. But it's been about 40 years ago, so I think I've got the basic grip of what it's supposed to say, but I don't know exactly what's going on. And it's very dangerous to take advice from a person like me. And I feel it's dangerous to take advice from most of, if not all of the attorneys and agents. And it's dangerous to take the advice of the administrators at the unions, because their contract is a preset contract that's been done 10 years ago. Your feeling about that, is it really that bad? Because, I mean, we've seen so many guys fighting about what their contract says.
Thanks, Carl. And yes, it can be that bad, but it isn't that bad. And I'd like to say that as Bart said, not all agents are bad and not all clubs are bad, and there's no bad intentions. I think it comes down to education, and it comes down to what's put in front of a player for them to look at themselves. Now, with respect to the 21-day contract clause, that was brought in by SARU and the various clubs through a collective bargaining agreement to assist players during COVID-19. Not only the 21-day clause, but there were various other aspects that were put in place to assist players. Normally, there's a 60-day contract clause, exit clause for players. The 21 days was brought down to assist players should they want to move. Now, we can commend Sorry for having done this, because they were the only union in the world that offered this 21-day exit clause for players to assist them. I mean, there was a very real possibility that all players decided to use that clause and disappeared off to Europe and Asia and play. But Saru foresaw that option available to players would assist them and guide them and provide them with an option should they need it. Now again, there's a difference between being an attorney and being someone that has studied the law. Now, I don't put it past any of the lawyers to know, the agents to know the law and to know what they can and cannot do, but it is important that, as you said, with respect to a contract being put in front of a player, that they know the specificities of that contract. If it is a standard contract, there may be various clauses that have changed, there may be addendums to the contracts that need to be signed. So it's not so much a case of, here's a standard contract, don't worry, everyone gets the same contract, so we don't have to read it or we don't have to look at it. It is important to scrutinize every single clause of your contract, or to get someone to do that for you. And that's where, as Bharat has touched, it's very important to mentor players and to mentor agents to provide the best assistance, because we all work in a team, we're all together. Agents, clubs, unions, we're all stakeholders in the game of rugby. So it's vitally important that we all sit on the same level playing field, that players know what they're entitled to get, players know what they're not entitled to do, and the same for the clubs. There shouldn't be a gap in knowledge between what the clubs know and the players know. So I think, going back to my previous comment, with respect to agents, another important thing that we must remember is that SARI accredits their agents, and there's a reason for that. Is so that we can weed out, the scallums, as you've mentioned, that there aren't people that are approaching players at a young age that shouldn't be approaching them. They've done their test, they've paid their license fee, they're accredited to SARI, they can be held accountable for their actions by SARI. So that's another important thing, that as soon as a player is approached, perhaps have their parents inquire whether or not this agent is a SARI accredited agent. Does he work for a reputable company? What can he offer the player in return for his services?
But I think it's maybe another topic before we end off this conversation with Shane is, what do you have to look at? You've got now a contract. Let's say we had a discussion just now. France is becoming a very difficult place to be as a player from a foreign country and everything. What do the parents have to look at? Firstly, they've got to get your number and sit next to you while you go through the contract. But if they speak to the agent, what must they look at, and what is the questions they must ask the agent before they even consider coming to you for advice?
Definitely. I think one of the most important questions that needs to be asked from an agent is, what relationship will you have with my child? Now, as Bharat has touched on, one of the most important things that an agent will first ask is can we sign an agreement for my commission? Because at the end of the day, it's a business. That's what the agent is in front of you there for. He is there to not only assist you, but also as a business opportunity for him. He needs to grow his portfolio, he needs to sign players, he needs to make money in order to assist you. So I think a parent needs to establish what it is that agent wants from the player, because there's a difference between an agent that wants to look after a player and wants to mentor him and guide him through his career and be there for him, and an agent that wants you to be signed onto the books, and when you phone him, he never answers the phone, or he's too busy, and he only sees you as a business opportunity. We need to weed those agents out of the system and only have agents that are there for the players. They are there to help the players grow. They are there to help the players develop as not only rugby players, but adults. Because players coming out of school at the age of 18, getting offered professional contracts, they have stars in their eyes. All they see is playing in front of a massive crowd at Ellis Park in a Super Rugby match and becoming famous. They don't see that a lot comes with that. I'd just like to maybe perhaps discuss one of the players that have been in the media recently in the UK, is Janse van Rensburg, previously with the Lions and the Bulls. As I'm sure most of your readers have been following, Johan signed a contract with Gloucester at the end of 2018. Only 3 months later, on advice from his agent, and perhaps from some legal advice from within South Africa, he signed a new contract with Sale. Now, he's in big trouble. the agent has been fined, the club has been fined, and Gloucester now wants to potentially sue the player for breach of contract. And I think the reason that happened comes down to a simple lack of knowledge with respect to his contract. I don't think Rohan did anything intentionally. He didn't intentionally enter into a new agreement with Sale knowing he was breaching his contract with Gloucester. He thought, hey, listen, I've signed an agreement, but that doesn't matter because I've got a new agreement now. So perhaps in his mind he thought that agreement would have been null and void and cancelled. But that just comes down to knowledge and education from his agent, from his team around him, perhaps from his coaches. And that could have been avoided if Rohan from the very start knew he had an agreement and he couldn't enter into a new agreement. So it comes down to education and lawyers and agents being there for the player as opposed to just being there for the player to be on the books. You know, it's more about developing youth straight out of school, becoming a better man, becoming a better adult, getting ready for the world of business, life after rugby. It's a package. It's not so much, I'm your agent, you're here to play rugby, sign an agreement with me and I get my 10% at the end of the month.
But that's very nice, but then you've got an agent, you've got a club owner with Johan Goosen who bought cattle from his farm at excessive prices to also, I think when you get an offer like that, it's difficult. If you were properly raised or your integrity is still intact, you would immediately walk away from a deal, but the guys do not walk away from the deal. So there's always the dark horses, and I think there are more of them than we want to know. But my question is, what must a guy look? Must it include housing? Must it include, if you go to France, nobody speaks France. Must the agent make available a translator with the kid for the first 6 months or the first 12 months? What must the parents look at when they've got this contract in front of them?
Certainly, they need to look at how this will affect their child's life going forward. Where will they be staying? What relationship will the club have with, for example, the accommodation that the child is staying at? Where will he get, for example, does he get a stipend out of, if he's a development player going over there and he's being put up in housing, will he get a stipend to assist him with food and for entertainment? What obligations will he have with respect to traveling? What obligations will he have with respect to training? What obligations will he have with respect to media, with respect to doping? Now, we can break those all down into their each unique elements, but perfect example of going over to France and a young Afrikaans boy who, I speak for myself, my Afrikaans is terrible, so I can only imagine what it would be like to have Afrikaans as your home language, than to go to France where they only speak bad English. They don't speak any Afrikaans, they don't speak barely any English, and now you must communicate not only with the club, but with doping control agents that want to take your blood and urine, and with media that want to ask you various questions and might twist your tongue a little bit with respect to what you're saying. So as I said, it's a package, and it's important that before a parent looks at sending their player overseas, how would it affect that player? Not only his playing ability, but his mental psyche. Sending a 20, 21-year-old player overseas on his own, who lives with himself, or perhaps maybe he lives with a teammate. He's in the big bad world. He can maybe pick up the phone to his parents and get some advice, but he hasn't got a support. He hasn't got a support. How do I say this? Package. There aren't people there that are there to support him mentally, emotionally, and that's very important. And again, it's not about rugby anymore when it comes to professionalism. Rugby is an aspect of your contract. You play once a week, you train throughout the week, but there are more things that come with it. Now, training, doping, media, sponsorship deals, that all forms part of the bigger package. So I think when a player and their parents are looking at a contract and looking to send their child overseas, they need to look at the nitty-gritty. They need to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with a player saying, where will my child be staying? Please will show me pictures. There's nothing wrong with a parent asking, what will my child be doing day to day? Can you send me his schedule? Can you provide me with a list of people he'll come into contact with so that I can maybe assist him? And a very good suggestion. Perhaps it would be a good idea to ensure that players have a translator, or you can request that a club provide a translator to a player when he is having negotiations with the club with respect to further deals. If a player wants to be approached by the doping agency, again, whatever he signs there, he'll be held to that. So it's important that he knows what he's signing, and that he knows that there are people that are out there looking out for him.
Bart, ons gooi nou die microfoon die hele tyd om jou, but Shane, there's another question I want to ask you. I think we must make this a thing with 10 or 20 episodes. You touched on doping. You're also quite big on defending people with doping charges against them and everything. Obviously, your first advice is don't dope. And the second one is, it comes with the mentoring and everything, is make sure that the stuff that they give you are cleared and everything. You're handling one or two big public cases and everything there's a lot of attention given to. You're in France, and these guys pop you during the game and everything, whatever they want. What must you do, and what is your rights as a player? Not only France, I mean, it happens at Loftus, it happens at the Lions also. And there's a lot of guys that sponsors rugby players with nutritional stuff and everything. What's your advice to the players?
Well, perfect advice you gave off the top is don't dope. First of all, and second advice is, and a lot of players don't like to hear this, is avoid supplementation, because it's all too well that a player has been using supplements his whole life and he's never been tested positive before, but that doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. Now, there's numerous cases where supplements have been possibly contaminated on the line, or you get a supplement from your friend and you don't know where it comes from, but you trust him, so you don't have to worry about it, or take some pre-workout or take some protein, and then all of a sudden you get found positive for a doping sample, and it is a shock to you, because as I've said, you've been taking supplements your whole life, you've been taking the same supplements your whole life. Now all of a sudden you're found guilty for doping. What do you do? And it comes down to education. Again, a player must educate themselves first, and then have someone else educate them where they cannot perhaps understand the intricacies of doping. Now, the World Anti-Doping Agency looks over doping globally, but each country has their own national anti-doping agencies, and the rules might change slightly wherever you are, whatever jurisdiction you play in. So, for example, if you play in France, the French sports code will regulate your relationship with the player and the doping control officer. Where in South Africa, as with many of my clients have mentioned to me, but the system is different in South Africa. When I go over to France, all of a sudden there's a new system, there's new protocols, there's new ways of doing things, and I'm not sure how to handle it. So I think it comes down to educate yourself first, go online, do research about the supplements you're going to be taking, do research about what a doping control officer will be doing, what the process that will be followed when you get tested. Now, again, the best advice is to say always to abstain from using supplements, but practically that's not always possible. For example, when you go over to France, you might be preparing for a game, and then the trainer puts a supplement in front of you and says, take this caffeine chewing gum, take this taurine powder that you need for the game. Non-negotiable, everyone's taking it, you need it. And as a youth rugby player, you're not going to say, no, I'm not taking this, I have my own obligations. No, they feel pressured to do that. But again, a player should never feel pressured to do anything he doesn't want to do, because at the end of the day, the doping agency will hold you responsible. Whatever you find inside of your body, you are strictly liable for. If you're found guilty of a doping violation, and when I say guilty, the doping system is slightly different to the criminal system, whereas you're found guilty until proven innocent, as opposed to the other way around, innocent until proven guilty. You are essentially handed a 4-year ban for doping with respect to serious substances like steroids, and then you're asked to reduce that sanction by providing evidence as to the source of the supplement, as to your intention. Did you intend to cheat? Were you at fault? So I think it's very important that a player educates themselves. There's various learning platforms out there. the anti-doping education learning program online from WADA. SEDS does anti-doping education, but that again is not enough. So it's vitally important that before a player uses a supplement, before a player drinks any substance, before he eats any food that he might suspect or falls outside of the realm of his normal habit, that he investigates that thoroughly, because it might not even be sufficient for a player to Google, does a supplement have a contaminated substance in it? Because if he's found with that substance in his body, the doping agency will say, well, why didn't you approach your doctor? Why didn't you approach your club? Why did you take the supplement in the first place? What were your intentions behind this? So it comes down to education, education, education. And where a player doesn't perhaps have an indication of the reputability of a supplement, don't take it until such time as you've sent that supplement to your doctor and asked him, please, in writing, confirm, can I take this? Don't take a drink that's handed to you by a friend on the side of the field saying, oh no, it's just an Energade or it's just a Powerade, because they're not the one that's going to be held responsible should that drink have a substance contained in it that you're found guilty for. At the end of the day, you are strictly liable for what you put inside of your own body. So an anti-doping agency will require you to do your own learning, to do your own research. They won't hold anybody else accountable because it's you that took the substance. So I think it comes down to having a good team around you, as Bharat has touched on, having someone that can mentor you, that can assist you and provide guidance to you, that will say, listen, when you go over to France, things are going to be a little bit different. You know, when the doping control officer speaks to you, perhaps he's going to be speaking to you in French. So before that happens, set yourself up with someone that can translate for you. Prepare yourself for what is to come, as opposed to finding yourself in a position where you're shocked. Now you can't do anything about it. You knew it was coming, but you didn't think it would be too serious. All of a sudden, you have the doping control officer outside of your house. No, we need to do a test now, and you can't speak English, you can't sign the doping control form correctly. So it's, again, important. Know what's coming, prepare yourself for it by having a good team around you that can provide mentorship and guidance, I think.
Bart, ek beloof ek nou na jou toe kom. Shane, one last thing. You mentioned the other day that the permission needed to test the underage kid in South Africa is changing.
Yes, so SEDS have introduced a couple new rules. They haven't been implemented yet, but there's talks that previously at schoolboy level, SEDS would require the permission of the high school principal to come and test the athletes. And now that seems to be changing. It hasn't been implemented yet, but I foresee that it will change, that SEDS can come in and test an athlete without the principal's permission. If a match is held or a big school festival is held, SEDS will rock up and say, listen, I'm here to test. There's nothing you can do about it. I think previously a lot of schools would shield their players away from that. Perhaps they had their own anti-doping programs. Perhaps they did their own testing, and they didn't want there to be a clash. For example, there's numerous schools in Johannesburg and Pretoria that hand out 6-month bans for the use of steroids, whereas according to the rules, it's a 4-year ban. But because they're minors and because they're playing in schools don't want to ban youth at the age of 16 or 17 for 4 years. Practically speaking, it doesn't teach the player anything to be banned for 4 years at that age, because he himself doesn't know what he might have done wrong. His coach or his friend or his guy that he trains with at the gym said, listen, if you take this, you'll pick up 20 kilograms and you'll get 3 seconds faster on the 100. And the player says, oh, wow, that's incredible. I'm going to be in the Craven Week team next year if I do this. And they take it not knowing the consequences of that action. So it becomes more and more important now that SEDS are stepping in a little bit more. And as is their right, in my opinion, as a lawyer, that they should be able to oversee everything without needing to gain permission, because that is their mandate, is to ensure drug-free sport in South Africa. So going forward, we might see SEDS testing more athletes at schoolboy competitions, and that's the warning out there to all players, is that if you are doping, there's an increased possibility that you will get caught, and if caught, you will suffer the consequences. No longer will you get 3 or 4 month suspensions from your school. SEDS will step in and they will want to ban you for a considerable amount of time, and that could be the end of your career. It's very easy for you to take a supplement once at the age of 18, and you'll be playing rugby again when you're 22 years old. And most likely you won't, because by then everyone that didn't dope, that you played with, has developed muscles naturally, and they've excelled in their specific area, and they've gone past you when you were trying to take a supplement back and when you were in school to try and maybe jump over everyone else. So just beware the consequences of your actions. 4 years is a very long time for a youth rugby player, and you don't want to find yourself in a position where you took something, maybe even just once, accidentally, just to see what it did to you, and now you find yourself banned for 4 years.
But you're an agent now and everything. Lawyers are known to talk quick and think later and talk nonsense a lot of time. In Afrikaans, they're called prokureurs. But do you see any value in your agency and other kids outside there and other players outside there to involve a person like Shane? And why do you?
Carl, yes, I think as a core message from my side, and this is where parents should listen very carefully, and the players themselves. I think that's a core message that's come out through the whole discussion up to now is, you firstly as a player, when you're 18, or your parents empower someone to guide and mentor you before you're 18, do so knowing that that person is at the player's service, not the other way around. So you appoint someone to service the player. And in service, it's not only legal and contractual. It's also what goes on off the field. And the very important thing here is, it comes back to the whole mentorship and guidance principle is, you cannot send a player into a playing contract or at a union without giving him the right advice. That advice, I have got great experience and life experience from where I come. I've raised 2 kids in and out of school, done sport, etc., etc. But that has got its limits. The fact of the matter is, when it gets to really advising someone in the right manner, you've got to use a specialist. You've got to have someone that you can fall back onto. Not one of my players will step into a playing contract without him having a discussion with an industrial psychologist, for example, that I've got as part of my team advising the players before he really goes in that direction. There's certain things that the psychologist, having a sports background, being a professional sportsman, and having the background of advising young professional athletes, it's things that I don't really know about. I don't have the full scope of the legal background that a Shane has got. So I would constantly, if not get the player to talk to the specialists themselves, being advised by the specialists. There's no chance that you can and be in a position to give them the right advice. We know that service providers and providers of products put the players and the agents under pressure. For example, we've spoken about energy stuff and whatever goes with that. Players get money to advertise it. So how do you advise them? It's no point. A player should take full responsibility, and every parent and player should know that, and coaches back at school. They must eventually take full responsibility. There's no turnaround to say, I did not know. You've got to make sure that you know exactly, or have the WADA manual in terms of everything that is forbidden and you should not use. There's no excuse for not knowing. And that is where guidance and mentorship from an agent comes in, is to make sure that your player has got the information at hand. It's got the legal information at hand. There's no excuse for a player double using an agent either abroad or locally and afterwards saying, I did not know. I will blame the agent locally or the player for abusing the situation that he might have benefited financially. There's no excuse for that. So make sure that there's a very clear agreement between the agent locally and the agent abroad, for example. So there's a clear guidance principle of the buck stops somewhere. That buck stops with a player. You as a player have got to take the responsibility. No one's going to take the fall for you. But eventually, if I'm a parent, I will look back at an agent or a mentor because you trusted that person. And you've got to make sure that that person is knowledgeable about the things you want him to advise your kid about. So that's the short and the long of it, Carl.
So to sum up the whole situation is, if you're in negotiations with any club or any agent, insist on a guy like Shane. It doesn't have to be Shane. If an agent tell you it's not necessary, I've got my legal degree, chase him away. He's bad business. Shane, thank you so much. Bart, thank you. We're going to do a short stuff afterwards. Shane, you're more than welcome, but we're going for a small break. Alright, dit was baie insiggewend wat ons nou met Shane gesit en gesels het. Shane het aangedring om ons gesprek by te woon oor die rugby ook, om hy wil graag wys hoeveel hy weet van rugby ook. Bart, maar ons gaan Shane eers kans gee om te hoor wat ons sê voordat hy nou iets gaan sê. Super Rugby, Blues het weer gewen, Crusaders het teruggekom, lyk baie goed. Ek kry net nie vat aan die nuwe manier wat die ouens die reels blaas nie. Dit is 'n oormaat van strafskoppe die eerste week gewees. Nou die tweede week, nou skop al die ouens om die losgemaalde te vermy.
Ja, ek dink is 'n klassieke geval van ons probeer om een verkeerd met 'n volgende verkeerd reg te maak al. En dis 'n beginsel wat net in wiskunde werk daai. Waar 2 minus 'n plus maak. Ek het byvoorbeeld gehou van die manier hoe die skeieregter die Blues Crusaders wedstryd en ook die vorige week se Blues wedstryd die reëls toegepas het. Maar dit maak nie vir aanskoulike rugby nie. Dis ongelukkig die realiteit is ons verander die reëls, maar ons verander nie noodwendig die reëls om die spel beter te maak en meer vloei te gee nie. Ek dink vir die eerste keer in Nieu-Seelandse spanne aan hulle lyf gevoel hoe jy behoorlik gepolisieer word by die losgemale. En spesifiek in die 2 Blues games. So die span wat die beste aanpas by die losgemale en seker maak dat hulle aan die regterkant van die skeieregter bly, kry hulle neuse voor. En ongelukkig is dit sleg, want nou beland jy in 'n situasie dat ons met die skeieregter manipuleer op die regte manier sodat ons kan wen rugby speel en dis nie regtig waar mens wil wees nie.
But I mean, to play rugby, it's a competition, and it seems to me, Shane, that the guys are steering away from competition because the attacking team or the team with the ball are getting more and more advantage over the defending team. And it seems like we just, if we really want to speed up the game, we must bring back the competition in the scrums because there's no competition in the scrums. The scrum half can prepare his supper before he touches the ball and passes it out. So aren't we concentrating on the wrong areas of the game?
Certainly, and competition is a vital aspect of rugby union. I've had many commentators say to me that these rule changes are drifting us closer and closer towards rugby league. You know, competition at scrum time and at ruck time and the mauls is a vital part of rugby. And if we were to change the rules with respect to what's happening now in Super Rugby, penalties at the ruck, penalties at the maul, and no competition, it takes away a vital aspect of the game. Forwards then play a lesser role. You know, the much publicized bomb squad of the Springboks, perhaps they wouldn't have had as much of an impact if competition is taken away from rucks. I think it's good that we're expanding the game and we're looking to make changes where necessary, but I also think it's important that we don't lose track of what rugby is about. It's about competition. It's about the nitty-gritty at the rucks. Yes, you must enter into the ruck through the gate, but at the same time, if you enter 1 centimeter out, you shouldn't be penalized for that. It's in the spirit of the game that competition will happen, and we need to keep that to keep rugby union trotting along.
Yeah, the offside line also, the new rule or the new interpretation says that you must be clearly onside. So clearly onside for one referee is 1 centimeter and for another referee is 3 meters. But it's just, ons verloor die game. Ons is regtig besig om rugby te verloor. En ek kan nie dink dat die toeskouers meer word nie. Nie vir wat ek die laaste 2 naweke gesien het nie.
Yeah, Carl, I have to differ a little bit from my learned colleague here next to me. In allowing a referee to apply the rules for the sake of letting the game flow becomes a very dangerous area, because that's where we find ourselves in world rugby at the moment, is that we start nailing referees because they're not biased, but they want the game to flow, and therefore they end up in a situation where one team might win that should not have won because he's more lenient. So therefore, I don't have a problem. I really don't have a problem if referees seriously apply the law in the right way. The issue lies with the lawmakers, and that is exactly what you're saying, Carl, is that it's all about the laws that we are making that's taking away the character of the game. So there's nothing wrong with applying the right law that's clear-cut, where you've got a physical contest up front and making sure that the laws are applied. When it's an offside line, it's an offside line. It's got a line. It's not a grey line. It is a line. And 1 centimeter is offside. So why did it take soccer 150 years to start using goal line technology? Because it made differences in winning championships, and winning and losing championships makes a huge difference in terms of sponsorships and earning money out of the game. So therefore, if there's a rule, you got to stick to the rule. It's like use of banned substances. If you used a little, it doesn't make you less guilty than using a lot. So my point that I want to make is, we've got to get the laws right. Ons moet die reëls kry dat dit sin maak vir rugby sonder om die karakter van die game te verander, en dan moet ons die reëls toepas, want ongelukkig kan jy nie in 'n grys area beland met die reëls nie.
It just seems to me that world rugby is in a desperate race to become a world sport, which will, according to me, never happen. This morning they said, the Japan Times said that rugby is dying in Japan. You can't sell a T-shirt of the World Cup anymore. They reckon for the next 3 or 4 years, the big rugby clubs in Japan will fork out a lot of money, and then rugby is going to die in Japan because it's just simply not part of their culture. It's a desperate race. I can't see why we must have a global game of rugby. Shane, but the rugby itself, what did you think about it?
Well, I'll speak for myself, but I'm very glad to see rugby back. And look, I wouldn't mind seeing our own boys play in Super Rugby again. But if we must watch the All Blacks run around on a field, I'm not too disappointed. But it's good to see rugby back, and it's good to see making plans. Rugby Australia are moving to bring Super Rugby back, and of course we're in talks about bringing rugby back. Right now it's a very difficult time. COVID-19, sports might not be on the top of everyone's mind, but I think it's good for morale, and it's good to get sports back on the TV for people to be watching. I just wanted to touch on one aspect there that Bart mentioned with respect to the offside line. I know World Rugby are in talks about bringing in laser technology to apply to the field for an offside line. Do you think that would affect the integrity of the game? For example, VAR in football. It's a lot of people have called out that it should be removed. It's ruining the game. If a player is half a centimeter off, one of his bootstraps is just a little bit ahead of the offside line, and he's offside and he's penalised, will that not maybe change the spirit of the game? I understand exactly what you're saying, that is, the rule is a rule, and I'm actually a World Rugby referee as well, sometimes ref for the Blue Balls Union. I understand the meaning of a rule, but at the same time, I love rugby, and I don't want to see it move somewhere where the spirit of the game will die.
I agree, Shane. The VAR technology is not that popular with everyone. although to me it comes down to rule makers. So if you apply the rule constantly and consistently through your refereeing structures, you would probably not end up having to look at technology. And I think that is exactly where we're going with regards to offside lines. We don't want to take the human factor out of it completely, but just apply the rule. So if you miss out by half a centimeter or centimeter, it can be done. You've got 3 officials on the field that's in a position to police and apply the rules properly. And then you've got a television official as well. So there's certain guidelines that you just have to adhere to. But we've even seen with the use of the technology in rugby, how different that was applied in the past, where people on the outside could not understand how one television official sees it in a different way from another one. So it's all about the human factor, and it's all about getting back to lawmaking. So do we make laws to change the game to satisfy needs outside of the field, or do we make laws to apply the laws properly? And if you apply, even if it's just by the human eye with 4 officials on the field, if you apply the law properly, we probably don't have to go to technology to the extent that we do now. So I agree with your worry about bringing in laser technology and stuff like that. Could further slow the game down, take away the character of the game. But all we need to do is have the officials on the field, apply the law as it should be applied, and stop putting in sub-laws to cover bad law application. That creates a problem in the game.
I wanted to shoot Shane because he's a lawyer and now he's a referee also. Avoid him as far as possible. No, not really. But I agree with Shane. When we brought in the TV referees and that, the game slowed down. You had the stop-start business and everything, and now in a futile attempt, we're trying to change the soul of rugby to make it fluent again and to keep out the stop-starts. I say just get proper referees. I mean, old Freek Burger and those guys did what they could on field. But I think the playing time on the field was a lot more than what we're having now. Now we're sitting with directors for the referees. We're sitting at, I think, this stage at 32 minutes of actual play on the rugby field. Now they must start leaving small transgressions out of the game in order to get more rugby time. And Shane, I agree with you. I mean, technology is ruining the game. We're losing the soul of rugby. And I'm going to leave it with that. Shane, thank you so much. I think we learned a lot, but we're going to misuse you more frequently because I think it's a field in rugby, not South African only, but it's a field in rugby worldwide that at this stage it's unknown for everybody except for a few guys like you. And thank you for your information. Bart, sorry dat ons jou nie baie praatkans gegee het nie. Maar sommige goeders weet jy nie alles van nie. Dit was nou 'n lekker gesprek geweest. Ons het dit baie geniet hier by Shane hulle. Doen jouself 'n guns. Ek dink nie, ek weet nie hoeveel Shane vra vir 'n onderhoud of 'n kontrak wat na hom toe gemail word of gefaks word nie. Maar spandeer daai geld in jou kind se toekoms, want die 2 of die 3 of die 5,000 wat jy nou gaan spandeer om iemand so Shane saam met jou op jou kind se toekomsrit as rugby speler gaan wees, gaan hom heel waarskynlik red van 'n 4 jaar of 'n 8 jaar suspensie omdat hy drugs gebruik het of omdat hy die verkeerde kontrak gesluit het. So ek dink daai geld wat jy vir Shane gaan betaal is dalk baie goeie investment in jou kind se loopbaan.